Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to this masterclass on the feminine face of embodied leadership. A very interesting title, I think, and it's really great to have all of you here. We have people we have Slovenia, UK, Trinidad and Tobago, Denmark, France, South Africa, all of us in the house. This will make for a very interesting discussion. I want to introduce you to Dr. Marion Gibbon, who she's a tremendous professional, but also human being in terms of her empathy and compassion and her ability to share insights that can really, push you along. I'm speaking from personal experience. So I really have enjoyed exploring friendship and understanding more about leadership along with Marion. Marion has a PhD in health and social sciences and has been working in the field for over 20 years. She's now the Assistant Director of Public Health at Birmingham City Council and has just recently authored a book called The Feminine Face of Embodied Leadership after doing research with female leaders from all over the world. And she has been developing tools out of her research and out of her own explorations on the feminine aspects of leadership. And she's going to be sharing some of those tools with us. She works right now as well, enabling women to become more empowered. And, I can endorse that she has helped me in my own walk. So welcome, Marion, and I hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Margaret, for that very complimentary introduction. So let's then just think about that. What do we mean by feminine and masculine? And that, I think, is possibly a very good place to start, because I'm not saying that this is only about women, but what I have been trying to do within this exploration is to bring the voice of women, because so often women have been left out of the discussions about what leadership is. Most of the research that we have is based on a much more male-dominated paradigm of leadership. So I'm just trying to bring a bit more of a balance to this discussion. And so, as Margaret said, I've been doing some research into this and have published. I undertook interviews with 20 really incredible women from across the globe, from peacemakers in Sri Lanka to one of my friends in South Africa, Cambodia. So yes, so very much an international perspective, but from much a women's point of view, and ended up with 13 different characteristics through that exploration, and some of that I will share with you today. But now to you, how do you define feminine, and what makes something feminine? And Margaret, I'm going to start with you.
Wow, how do I define feminine and what makes something feminine? I think in my own mind, I have developed a framing, a heuristic, if you want to call it that, of feminine means soft, it means open, it means flow. Masculine is far more, it's about aggression, assertiveness, fixedness. And because I've had that in the back of my mind, I guess socioculturally, in my makeup, in the explorations that I'm doing now in my research, where I'm looking at personal agency and structure in the context of complex systems thinking, and how do we, look at policy change through that lens, somewhere along the line, I just started to align personal agency with, and push power as masculine, and acceptance and system and structures as feminine. So I know there's a lot lacking of clarity I have around this topic, which is why I would love to see it explored. And I would love to hear other people's views on what they perceive to be masculine and feminine. I think it's in all of us. Both are in all of us. And I think socioculturally, we've put labels on it. That's my take on it. But I'm more about the essence of the different aspects of who we are, which we've labeled masculine and feminine, but really and truly, they may not be masculine and feminine at all. It could just be that and this, if you want that and this. Yeah.
Using and instead of or, either or. So who else would like to have a comment on this? And then we'll move on to what I'd like to share with you.
I could make a comment.
Go for it.
I'm 32 years old, orbits around the sun. So I'm talking from that point of perspective, and I am male. Like on a biological level, for me to see, I saw an interesting study that examined the brain in scanners and so on, and the brains of human beings with those symptoms called autism and ADHD, but especially autism, and on the spectrum. What they found out was it was actually a hyper male brain, in that sense of those features that makes the small differences, but general nonetheless, of male and female, were extremified on that spectrum. And for me to see that makes much sense. And aggressiveness is, in that case, maybe not necessarily a male. Of course it is. Testosterone is aggressiveness. It's shown in all studies with apes and so on. But people with autism, that's also showing this tendency of focusing in on something. And I think that is a very male thing in that, on a biological level, to focus in on and isolating different aspects of the universe and maybe go long and hence a disconnection from something else, but a deepened focus on something. And its generalizations, of course, it is in all of us. It's aspects in all of us. And I think it needs new names in many ways, feminine and masculine. But I also see it as, if I should divide it up in generalization, I would see that the feminine would be the local and the male would be the global, in the sense that everything is local right now. And I know maybe it is provocative to some, but only in a misinterpretation. I'm seeing it in a position like where the female and feminine energy are developed and evolved to, in essence, revolve around children and those aspects, where the male are, now I'm talking generalizations, we all have heard this, and the males are the providers and so on. And in that sense, those features of masculine energy, I see them as looking at systems that are outside our local sphere, where female and feminine energy is a totally different approach from things, but has relevance in the local sense, being present, constantly aware that, okay, the child now is nearing the edge of the cliff. You are constantly aware, not eat that fucking plant there, where the male energy have more, I'm also maybe talking about position, but more excess energy to look beyond that and look, okay, maybe behind that tree there's an animal. Let's follow that idea that there's an animal there, and then we can hunt it down. So I think most of the generalization made through thousands of years, also of the cognitive, the logical, and so on, and the nurturing, the emotional, the empathetic, I think in those senses and terms are good descriptions of what we call feminine and masculine, not male and female.
Lovely, thank you, Earthen. Yeah, Joy, I see you've raised your hand, and then we'll carry on a bit because so I can share with you.
Sorry, I saw Becky also has a hand up.
Oh, right, I couldn't see Becky.
Oh,
Okay,
all right.
after you.
No, go ahead, Joy. I'll
sure?
try and do something quite succinct afterwards. I'm not very good at succinct, but I'll try.
Okay, I'm going to be trying quick. The way I would see it is, I look at us from our humanness, our humanity, not seeing male or female, but looking at our humanity, and what we have in common is a head, heart, and our hands. And at different times, how we engage and lead uses sometimes more of our head with our hands or our heart with our hands. You see, for a whale swimming in the Indian or in the Atlantic Ocean, they know no boundaries because the boundaries are man-made. And so the definitions of how we view masculine or feminine leadership are man-made. And so my explanation would be, if we look at our humanity, we all have a head, heart, and hands. And leadership is how much we lean into leading with heart or leading with head through our hands. Thanks.
I love that. Oh, very much so. Becky, to you.
Thanks. Yeah, oh gosh, picking up on things that everybody said, starting with Margaret, I think I've probably kind of engendered the same kind of characteristics in my own mind about what is sort of classifiable as male and female. But I agree with Earthen, and I think with Joy that, and forgive me if I'm speaking for anyone, that those qualities don't necessarily need to be attributed to respectively to men and women. On Earthen's point, I am quite myopic and analytical with study and work, but I have a wonderful yoga and mindfulness teacher who uses the example of an eagle or a bird of prey who can have this incredibly focused view on a piece of prey, and yet the capacity to see this kind of broader image. So there are things like that. But I think what Margaret said really resonated for me around, I suppose, characteristics that are sort of traditionally thought of as softer. And I think what I've been learning in a very personal journey about finding my own voice, and in other aspects of my work and the world around me, is to try and learn to trust those things that I think have been and still are in many work environments disparaged as not being valid, because they're not hard-edged, they're not maybe decisive, but actually maybe having a kind of sprawling, open conversation. I'm very into Brené Brown at the moment, and that whole idea of making yourself vulnerable and the courage in that. And actually, those two things are not diametrically opposed. They're hand in hand. You can't be one without the other. So I suppose lots and lots of things there, but I think it's true that we are a mix of these things. And so I was really excited that you were starting off the masterclass with looking at what we thought of that, because I'm very open to having that challenged and hearing people's views on that. And just as a last note, the most powerful, I was very, very, very privileged when I worked at Citizens Advice Scotland for a long time. I had a CEO whom I absolutely adored, who's now retired, but is the independent advisor on race and equality for the Scottish Government. And she was the epitome of a powerful, quiet voice with a phenomenal sense of justice as well, which is why I just adored her, and charisma and fun, and just, to see how she sort of commanded things with a very gentle touch, not a manipulative one. It was absolutely authentic. So I've kind of seen it in action, not very often, but yeah, I'll leave it.
Oh, that gives me a really lovely place to start. Because the other definition that I really want to bring to you is that around embodiment, which has already been raised. Because and I really liked Joy's comment about head, heart, and hands, because I also like to make sure that I called it the mind, mind, the body, and the spirit are the parts that I feel that we have to bring into our lives on a daily basis. And if we are talking from our heart, that is where we have the power, even in our quietness, because people can realize that we are being truly authentic. So that was the other element that I wanted to bring in at this point. And now I'm going to try and share my screen, and I really hope this works. So here we go. Are you seeing my screen now? Great, lovely, thank you. So this is the title of the book that Margaret mentioned to you, and hence the exploration around what is meant by feminine, and why I wanted to share what I meant by embodied and embodiment. Because one of the things that I feel is really crucial in the times that we are in now, as we come out of the pandemic, which is actually a situation that is going to stay with us for a very long time, because we know that we've been seeing further variants. And so until the whole globe is effectively cared for in relation to this, we're going to see outbreaks arise as we go on. So, and one of the things that's been very interesting for me to see is something that Margaret mentioned to me right early on when she was looking at who was doing better in terms of caring for their populations around the pandemic. And it was in the countries where the rule of law was much greater than others. And we've seen this particularly in the case of the UK, where there's been all sorts of problems and in fact, one of the things that I found interesting is that countries where the leadership is feminine have done it a whole lot better than others in some cases. So I thought that was a very telling in some respects, because usually what you consider that in a crisis, you need a very dogmatic, autocratic approach to leadership to get things done. But has made me think over the course of this pandemic that maybe that's not the case, that what we actually need is something different. And this whole discussion around how do we negotiate the new normal that Margaret has been having within these conversations has been very key to my thinking as we come through and consider where we are going and how we make our world a better place to live and work and have fun and be. So I started by looking at what is our presence within this world, and how do we understand our essence? And that's one of the things that I've been exploring, is you can be quiet and have others understand and be able to lead, and be quiet and lead. You don't have to be extrovert to lead. And I think that's been really key to me, because I remember when I was doing a leadership training, I was told, oh, you don't lead from the front. And I quite agree with that. I don't necessarily lead from the front. I'm a quiet sort of person. But what I do is enable connections and people working together and getting things done. And people feel, those that I work with, are extremely proud of what they managed to achieve in doing just that. So what I've been looking at is, how do you enable that to happen? How do you facilitate that? And some of that has been through my exploring of coaching and mentoring, and how you can develop those skills in others. Sorry, that way. So the whole thing about bringing your whole self into something, I've then been looking at, well, it's not always just writing or speaking out. Sometimes it's just through the act of putting a poem together that you can do some of these things. And I have really found that the use of poetry has really enhanced my leadership. And I've had many conversations with others who are in leadership positions around how they've used poetry within their work. Andrew Matchon, who's a fabulous coach, works in the NHS. He's a photographer and a poet and a superb coach. And I've enjoyed having conversations with him around this. And so I was exploring this concept and came up with this. So body work is our soul work, and creativity and imagination, the bridge between our worlds. To heal, make an image, take into our body, breathe to connect, mind, body, and spirit. Change from the inside out. Become your best self that you need to be. So one of the things that I thought I would get you to do is to actually physically feel the ground. So, and I kind of suggested to Margaret there was a list of things to bring. And what I'd like you to do, if you're open to this, is to just find yourself a comfortable place on the ground. If you've got a mat or a blanket, that would be great. And just lie down and feel the earth beneath you. And breathe in and out and feel that connection to the earth. And I'm going to try and just play some music for that 10 minutes. I've got some lovely pieces, and I'll find one of them just now.
Okay, guys, while we wait on Marion, has anyone done that exercise, lying on the mat, or are you still doing it? I'm just wondering. Are people doing the exercise? Joy, are you doing it? You're sitting in your chair, Joy.
No,
You're
just
cheating. Okay,
No.
good.
I was on the floor. I just got up.
Okay.
To sit up a bit again. No, it was beautiful. Thanks.
Oh, it was? Good.
Yeah, it's very different.
Good.
You feel like you can be part of the earth. And for that moment when you close your eyes and breathe deeply, almost getting a sense of the movement of the earth at the same time. Yeah, so thank you.
Right. I wonder if we could invite Alyssa to come and lead us in some breath work while waiting for... Because I was wondering, I think I typed it in the chat. I don't think Marion saw it before she left. Are we thinking that process of connecting with the earth and being in your body on the earth is in fact a process by which we access the feminine, or is this a feminine process itself? If you understand what I'm trying to ask.
I think both. I think part of operating in the feminine is being open to, as you know, very much a mission of use of being open to what is wanting to emerge, and being accepting of the fact that that is sometimes not a straight line. I mean, look,
Like
the
this
facilitator got bumped off. Her internet said no. And you know, we always have access to the breath. We don't need anything else. We don't have to have extra equipment. And being able to take a breath reminds us that there's always possibility, there's always space. So sit up nice and tall on what dancers like to call their sit bones. When I do this with guys, I like to tell them, grab your butt cheeks, but only if no one is looking. And part of breathing is giving yourself space, and laughing helps us to do that. Okay, we're going to breathe primarily in and out through the nose and be very, very gentle. Part of the curiosity is being present to what your body is saying. So breathe out and just let your air fall toward one shoulder. Really gently. very, very gently, and see what your neck says. And as you exhale, come back to center. Very, very gently. We're just going up, and exhale again. Let your head go over to the next shoulder. Your nose is still pointed at your camera, and you're just letting your air down. Inhale, come back up to center. And even very, very gentle changes. You might feel a little movement or a little current running down one arm and the other. And very, very gently, let's do that again. And if you're like me and have a pretty big head, and about 5 pounds of hair that you usually wear piled up on top, you might realize that your neck is doing quite a bit of work. And as you just inhale and exhale, you could just, be grateful that your neck is doing that, and you don't have to think about holding your head up. And inhale again, come back to center. And what you can do is take your non-dominant hand, that is the one you don't write with or fence with or pick clementines with, and just put it on your chest. Breathe in through the nose, and just be aware of the fact that as you breathe in, your chest is rising, and exhale gently. And just take a couple more breaths here. Breathe in, see if you can follow the breath, and breathe out. And just do that a couple more times. Just be present and be curious with the breath and about the breath. Feel the breath coming in and going out like waves. Always leaving, always coming back to us. On the next inhale, take the other hand and put it low on your belly. And as you breathe, just begin to notice that the breath might travel a path, and one hand might rise and then the other. But only if it's comfortable for you, and only as resourced as you feel able to do. And if you feel yourself getting lightheaded, or that's not comfortable, you can put both hands in your lap. And what we'll do now is begin to count the breath. And take a nice full exhale, just let the breath out. We can even try a sigh. And another sigh. Just feel the weight come off of you. Feel a little bit more ease in your body. And we begin to count. In, 2, 3, 4, 5, and out. 2, 3, 4, 5. See how that feels in your body and continue that count. If you find that's difficult or you find yourself getting lightheaded, go with a count of 4, or if that is not comfortable, use a count of 3 and keep the breaths even. A couple more breaths here, and begin to come back into the room. Notice if there's anything different. Do a little bit of a body scan. Feel how your shoulders feel. Feel the weight of your body in your seat. Feel your feet on the floor or on the ground. Notice if there's any wind. Pay attention to the sounds around you. Just give yourself a moment to land really firmly back in your body. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and come back. Just a quick note, that 5 count. Various prayers for various religions put our breath into that pattern of in and out for 5 counts. And when you do that, if you count in, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that seems to be what the research calls the perfect breath. 5.5 breaths lasting 5.5 seconds per minute. You know, you say the rosary or run some prayer beads, you get the same effect, and it's amazing that that happens. So I hope that was helpful. I hope that was interesting or a little bit helpful. And we can come back.
Alicia, that was wonderful. Really, really wonderful. And really interesting about the religions and the counting. It's really interesting. It's kind of amazing the way science is sort of finding so much about things that we've done through millennia in different traditions and cultures and religions that is actually kind of connected to, I suppose, a sense of mindfulness. And prayer is for many a kind of mindfulness, isn't it? And that's fascinating. Anyway, thank you very much. That was a little blessing after in a tech glitch, a little unexpected blessing for the day.
Yes, thank you so much. Beautiful, wonderful.
Yeah, and isn't this, as you were saying, Alyssa, a way of accessing a feminine approach to problem solving? Would you say that? Because the masculine in us right now, we're having tech difficulties and all of that. You know, what's the masculine approach to that problem? Oh my God, where's Marion? What are we doing? You know, let's get something going. But is it that the feminine approach is that exploration and that curiosity of what's happening inside of me right now?
I think that there is, as with everything else, there's a balance, because on one hand, clearly we have a technical issue going. I think more about filling, the masculine might be about structure. So what is actually happening? What is the actual challenge? How do we fix that? And at the same time, we can do that and be okay with doing something else at the same time. So it's not a matter of spending energy trying to fix something that we can't. We spend energy trying to figure out what's happening and fix what we can. And, you know, in the interim, we breathe a little bit.
I'm so sorry. It's just been a nightmare.
And we're back.
We're
Perfect.
just got back. Sorry about awful internet connection.
And you're in France, yeah?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
So
You know, France has the worst internet of the whole of Europe.
Okay. Some of us have done the exercise, some have not, but shall we pick up as if like what you would do from after the completion of the exercise? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So what I was then asking you to consider after that was how all of that felt to you. What came up from how that experience was in terms of feeling your body?
For me, really good to take my focus out of my head, which I often struggle to do. The busyness in my head, to focus on the body instead.
I think I would want to
really
add.
Excellent.
Sorry.
Have I gone again?
No.
We're still here.
You're here, and Joy was
Right.
about to say something. She was about to respond to your question.
Thank you. What I wanted to just add about what I noticed in my body and a little bit to the discussion we were having was, you know, you introduce it to us, Marion, as part of the presencing of, you know, connecting to the earth, feeling that, noticing, and that beautiful exercise that Alyssa did with us with the breathing. But what it did for me, what it noticed for me, is that when we take the time to breathe and to connect and to be still, we can become aware of so many other things around us. So for example, for me, while lying there, you know, I could notice how it felt to be lying on the hard surface and feeling a connection to the earth. And I just wondered to myself whether the feminine and the masculine elements of leadership, how it's probably inside all of us, but we need to bring attention to it. Much like we were lying down and trying to embody that. And it was just, I don't know why, I just thought there might be a connection from that perspective. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really lovely way of looking at it. And any other thoughts from others in the group?
I just was saying how good it was to take my focus out of my head.
Joy.
Sorry, that was Becky speaking, not me. Sorry.
Okay, all right. So one of the things that I find that it's the whole aspect of grounding and the breath work that Alyssa has shared with us is that it enables us to come and feel ourselves as present. And there are other things that I think will also help you in terms of developing what I call a framework for practice. And another thing that I tend to do, and I learned this from Judy Brown, who works in the States and has written about leadership a lot, and especially around the use of creativity in leadership. And she kind of looks at a framework of practice. And part of that is like maybe going for a walk in nature and then listening and fully listening to what is going on around you and noticing in the moment what is calling to you. If there is something that you see, like a leaf or maybe a feather or something like that, that you really comes to your attention, grabs you, And I sometimes take a camera with me if going for a walk, so that I can record that, or I might take a sketchbook at another time, and just then sit with an object for a while. Have any of you done that kind of, have any of you done something like that before?
I think I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, I quite often take my phone out to take cameras. I'm very blessed when I'm not here. I'm in close to the coast path in Cornwall, and but sometimes I force myself to not use the camera and to just kind of observe the thing, whether it's a tiny flower or a vast ocean. And again, I don't always find it easy to be kind of present in the moment because my head's often very busy, but yeah, I do try to observe. It's a work in progress.
Yeah, and I think I find that really helpful, and that whole thing about really looking at something, it enables you to really start to lead from that more embodied place. That this creation of a framework, as I call it, can be very helpful. And I'm going to try and go back to my presentation, and hopefully won't get kicked out again. So that I'm looking at something, bringing something from nature into your space, and sitting with it for a while and writing it is something I find very useful. And I was going to suggest that we might be able to do some of these things, but what I'll do, rather than, given that my internet can be unstable at the moment, is that if you've got something around you that you can just take and observe very with meticulousness, something that catches your eye in terms of something that's around you, and just spend some time with it. You might want to kind of sketch it or use some words. It can also be helpful if you're having a challenge within the workplace to kind of consider that at the same time and see if one helps the other. Right, so how did you find that? Just enable you to access another part of way of knowing at all? So the next kind of element that I thought would be interesting to look at, develop in terms of developing your individual framework, is to consider some of these questions about what is it that you're trying to contribute to the world, and does caring about it passionately contribute to your approach to life? Sometimes I'll write down the things that I feel are really important to me in terms of the social issues that I want to do something about. And I'll try and then explore around those and think about the steps that I might take to address those issues, and think about how I let other people know that that's what I really care about. And sometimes what can be helpful is, instead of using words for something, you can take collage materials and look at that and make a picture to explore around those issues. And I did a 10-minute, just took 10 pictures that I ripped out from magazines and made a collage up of them. And I found that then made me able to look at how I might address some of those questions. And I don't know whether any of you have similar at all. Sometimes people do it at the beginning of the year, kind of look at what they want to do over the course of the next year, as the beginning in January, to kind of set a vision for the year. Have any of you done such things at all before? What was it you did?
Is somebody else going, or shall I say?
No,
something?
you please start.
Yeah, I've done, not frequently, because I think I'm quite sort of fearful about my capacity to be creative. Although I recently started carving spoons, which was lovely, because I thought I found an outlet to something that I did kind of realize I had within me, that was kind of being forced to go literally with the flow of, literally with the grain, rather than kind of forcing something linear. But yeah, I have done that collage thing a bit, only once or twice, and I really enjoyed it, because it meant I didn't have to put the pressure on myself of being able to draw and do something that kind of fills me with fear. And yeah, so I really liked it. Was kind of like I don't know, like a sort of a different language, like using another language, I suppose, to express
That's really
emotions.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You should say that it's using another language, because I think that's one of the things that I'm getting at with this, is that there are different languages that we can use. The use of poetry in words, pictures, and it doesn't matter that you can't draw. It really doesn't. I would just get over the fear of, and I know that sometimes comes from the way we're taught art at schools, that you're supposed to be able to draw things perfectly, and you're kind of shamed that you can't, and all of that sort of thing. But I really, one of the things that Hank once said is that instead of trying to look at something, feel into what you're drawing, so that you're using a different element of yourself, and through that whole into what you're drawing, you might do something more abstract, but the representation will open up another element within yourself, and you'll get further bits of information to help you with putting this kind of, what do I really want to do? How do I want to lead? What's the important to me together? And I think that's really can be really, really helpful. Alyssa, have you any thoughts on this?
I also think that I can't draw well. So I made a slideshow, used a little bit of technology, grabbed pictures from all over, and looked at it. And it was on my computer, so I could see it there. So it took the pressure off having to be artistic. And it wasn't something that was aside from me. And I got into the habit of at least once a week opening it and looking at the things that I said to myself that I found important. That was really useful for me.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. No, I think that sometimes fears that we are not good enough really truly get in our way. And I've been kind of trying to look at some of that, because if you think about people that you might be a manager of a team, and some of those team members may well be really afraid of certain things, and if you can help them get over fears, and the whole thing about vulnerability in Brené Brown's work, I think is really crucial within all of that. And I think one of the things I came across a quotation just recently, which says about an artist, and they said, I hope I can create art that helps people heal, art that makes people feel proud of their struggle. And that can be using photography, using pictures off the web. It doesn't have to be the conventional sorts of art, as we call it. My sister, for example, said to me, oh, I'm not in the slightest bit creative. And I said to her, I don't think I believe you on that. And she said, why do you say that? I said, because I look at your garden where everything looks absolutely fantastic, so gorgeous, the way you've put colors together, the flowers that you've chosen, the things at the back are up high, and then you've got some things in the middle area and short things at the front. I said, that's a composition. It's artistic, it's creative. And my husband says that he's not artistic, but he'll create something for dinner that is absolutely beautiful, that he's brought his heart into it. And we'll sit around a table and all enjoy a meal together. So, and this whole thing about art and creativity is what enables you to innovate. And one of the things about being an embodied leader, a good leader, is that you look for the patterns in things and you try to do things in a different fashion. And this is what these ways that I'm sharing with you now, these different types of tools and approaches to things, are all to do with getting us to think in slightly different ways, to bring out other things that you can.
May I comment on that?
Yeah.
So what I've also found useful was to understand that people are different, and people have different learning styles and have different ways of absorbing and understanding information. And so if I am presenting, or if I'm trying to lead a team and I present in only one style, as in let me talk to them and rally the troops and have a big, that will speak to those people who want to be inspired and listen to someone who's got great words and what to say. But if I want to be able to talk to the entire audience, I also need to be able to present with a colorful PowerPoint or a sway document or something that's visually appealing. So the auditory, the visual, and then obviously you'll have those, the skeptics and those who want to know the data and the research. And so again, providing them with sufficient information to say it's backed up by this and here are the source codes, and so that you cover all the elements. I think what I've noticed, what I'm taking away from what you're doing here is, in doing that, in leading others and leading ourselves, we must be able to embrace those parts that are available to us, but we may feel uncomfortable to necessarily explore or use all the time. So because words are loaded and words have meaning, and when we say creativity, to the beautiful examples you gave, people will say, I'm not creative, but look at your sister, look at your husband. It's how they interpret the word. And so language can both limit us, but it can also free us. So thank you for that.
Yes, thank you. That's a lovely way. So I that whole thing of making a collage, I then put some words onto it, and that enabled me to then think about how I might make a presentation that's more interesting, doing exactly what you're saying, is that we know that there are people who are much more aesthetic or in their ways of learning, or they learn by doing, or they learn by talking to people. And all these ways, if we can consider that within the ways we approach our sharing, it enables everyone to have a part to play and feel wanted. And so I then use that time, the exploration, to write a poem about it. And this is what I feel is great, to enable people to realize that the way they put words together doesn't have to just be analytic all the time. It can open up you can say so much in a piece of prose or a piece of poetry. It doesn't really matter. But what I try and do is get people to think outside the box a bit more, and that enables people to become their best possible selves in what they do and how they operate. And it enables people to overcome some of their fears that they have in terms of expressing themselves. So some people feel completely overwhelmed at the prospect of talking in front of a whole shed load of people. But if you're able to kind of explore through the use of these different tools how they might do that in a way that's comfortable to them, it's really helpful. So I then turned that, my collage became a poem, which I've shared with you there. So that's a kind of looking at things on a more individual level that we've been thinking about. But when you've got an organization, and some organizations are quite challenging places to work. Where I work currently, there's a pretty much a long hours culture, and that some of my team think, well, unless they work these crazy hours, they won't be respected, or they'll not be seen as committed. They won't get on in they won't progress in their careers. And these are the things that I've been hearing just recently, especially as we've been working public health in terms of the pandemic. We've been working really hard, and it's been very traumatic for many people in the team, quite a bit of the time. And so I then started to work in the organization and to think about, with some of the other senior people, about how do we purposefully create protected spaces that enable people to share some of their concerns in a way that's respected, and this whole aspect of caring can come through. How do we show that we care within our organizations? How are we compassionate? And compassionate is not just being wishy-washy. Compassionate can be fierce as well. It's how can you be fiercely protective, fiercely able to empathize with others, all of those sorts of things. And that's what I was looking at in terms of making sure that we could have an organization where it was okay to show that you cared, that if you felt vulnerable, if you cried, if there was things going on in your own life, that it's okay to share those, not to be ashamed of them. And so then I looked at, well, if I'm going to do this and not be laughed at, because it's all quite, when you start talking about feelings, it sometimes makes things very uncomfortable for people. If you talk about mental well-being, which was one of the things that we really needed to address, I started to think about, well, I know that I'm going to need to have some allies in this discussion, and looked at making it okay to have a time to reflect at the end of the day, for people to share their reflections with each other. And so I then started to have a look at this, how we could address long hours culture within the organisation that I am in. So that's the organisational aspect. Then this one of the things that I've also found useful as a tool, which I've shared with Margaret as well in the past, is around, and this is where the whole thing about don't let your drawings get in your way and think that you can't draw, because it doesn't really matter in the slightest. Metacognitive drawing is the use of a drawing instead of writing or verbalizing. And I found that really helpful in that. And metacognition is the process of thinking about thinking. So metacognitive drawing is therefore thinking about thinking with a pen in your hand or a pencil, and just being free, not to try and think, what am I doing? But instead to just let your hand move freely across the page. And if you don't take your pen off or your pencil off, it enables you to dominate less than what you'd normally do. And so you can take a question that you might want to know an answer for and hold it in your mind. And then you can either close your eyes or keep your eyes open and just freely draw across the page with that question in your mind. And I'm going to set my timer for 2 minutes to just give you time to do just that.
With a question, Marion, are we doing it with a question?
No, I'm going to say you can use your own question. I'm not going to dominate. You can use something that you're exploring at the moment. All right. So what I've done here, I was exploring what I was about co-creation. One of the things that we're doing quite a lot at the moment at work is talking about design principles and co-production and co-creation. And so I thought, well, what do I understand by this? What's this trying to tell me? And so I took 2 pencils and I drew something initially just with pencil, and then decided I'd add some color. And so that was my exploration of what I understood by co-creation. But with you having had your 2 minutes to draw something, Margaret, did you do a drawing then?
Oh my gosh, put me on the spot. Yes, I did, but I'm not getting anything from it at the moment.
Aha.
Can you see? I can't tell what.
Yes, I can just about. Yes, I can see. Yeah. Sometimes it doesn't. What you need to know comes later. So just sit with it. As you know, you'll find something at some point.
Yeah.
And Joy, did you come up with anything?
I think I misunderstood the instruction. So what I did was, I'm not sure if you can see it or looking very blurry, but I thought you said we're not allowed to lift up our pen. So
You don't.
I just kept my pen going without lifting it up. So it's a page of doodles. And it went from, should I finish, make sure that every space is covered? And then I just became more absorbed in, let's go for circles, let's go for triangles, let's go for lines. And I wasn't thinking about my question. So I think I got distracted in the process of doing it.
That's interesting. And now as you look at it, is there anything that helps you with the question that you posed?
The only thing I would say is busy mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
And Becky, did you come up with anything?
Yeah, I did. I'm kind of envious in a warm way of Joy for, first of all, getting the exercise right, because I found it really hard to keep my pen on the paper. I kept lifting it up, kept starting again. And this is the picture.
Oh, yeah.
And it was kind of around the question of what I'm trying to do in West Cornwall about setting up a Green New Deal hub. So this was me, because I thought possibly a bit egocentric, but because it's it's I who is trying to sort of start this off with support. And what I've kind of been learning and thinking about in the run up to this is not about getting the same people who are interested, but actually really making the connections that make this step off the starting block meaningful, getting the stories heard from the people whose voices aren't heard, making the work around social environmental justice relevant to the local and the connection to the global, national and global. But I found myself doing what I do, which is very linear things. And then I thought, it's not what I want to do. It's not it. And it kind of did become a bit more fluid. So I was kind of linking more dots up, just literally linking the dots and then sort of circling it round, because I kind of wanted that to be about ripples moving out, so yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, state of mind. But it was, Margaret said she found it transformational, and actually I can see how that would be a really valuable tool to shift away from what I think in me is actually possibly something we would call a kind of traditionally masculine approach, that sort of quite linear, rigid approach. Thank you, it's really useful.
I found it really, really, I've got loads, because I just keep a sketch pad beside me, and now I do things like that, looking at how I'm feeling at times, or it might be something like, I was asked to draw about the faces of the muse, and so those are all with just not taking a pen off the paper at all. And as Margaret says, I find these just doing maybe one every day if you can, or just for a period of time, you'll be so incredibly amazed at the information that you are able that comes through. If you go back to that, Becky, and you're drawing tomorrow or the following day, you might want to add some words to it. You may well find that it really helps you consider exactly what you're looking for in terms of your hub, and how you get greater buy-in to it and connect with others. And these kinds of tools, I find that really helpful. I was asked to, my boss gave me a task to do. There's been a government consultation on women's health that finished a couple of weeks ago. And he said, oh, Marion, can you just draft something up and put it in for me? And he said, I just don't have the time for it. And so I thought about this, and I thought, what would be a different way of doing this? And then decided to use stories. So I've been doing some work with community researchers in Birmingham just recently, and they're all being trained in how to have conversations in their communities in their own languages, and maybe do participatory mapping and things like that. And so I sent out the questions to all of them, and then waited to find out what would come back in. And some of those things that were shared back with me are incredible. They were so immensely moving. I then had to present that to senior management and share before I was allowed to put it on the portal to go into the government consultation. And they then said to me, Marion, can you make sure that every organisation that is impacted by these stories receives a copy of this piece of work? So that, and then you ask them, what are you going to do about it? Because there were stories of women who've had poor maternity care over the course of COVID, not being able to go and see loved ones and what that's meant to them, having long COVID and what that's meant to them. All of those sorts of things, I had immensely powerful, moving stories come, and so that they're now put together. And what I would have loved to have done, but we just didn't have the time, is enable the women who shared their voices to share it actually as a recording. But I just transcribed those stories and sent them in a way. So that's why I think what I'm trying to get with this is that there are ways that are different than what we're normally used to, long reports and things, where we can present information in new ways which get the stories across that make the change possible. And so, as Margaret said, you don't necessarily, you look at your creation, you don't necessarily get anything from it now. You might feel something, you might find some emotions that arise in response to it. There might be something it's trying to tell you. And so I have a set of questions that I kind of use to look at what those metacognitive drawings are saying. So that's the end of the second section that I have. And then the final bit is about some tools that I found useful in terms of policy change. So what do you want to do at this point, Margaret? Do you want a gap?
I do. Yeah. I would. We have planned, Alyssa, as usual in our masterclasses, guys who've not come to our masterclasses before. We do have a section where it's called the transition lounge, where you can take a break, you can do a bathroom check and have a drink for 2 to 3 minutes. Then you come back and we do a breathwork session with you to center. But before you go, I mean, I don't want to get into too much detail into my experience with the tool, but I do want to share a little bit about that metacognitive drawing and how helpful it was to me, and what I think it can be really helpful for those of us who I think are up in our heads a lot, and we're thinking really hard about issues. What the process did for me, and the way Marion led me in that process, was actually a left hand and a right hand process. Where you have the sheet of paper, you have your question that that you're thinking a lot about, and you feel a little stuck on that question. And I guess the tool is supposed to be able to unlock hidden knowledge in your system, hidden knowledge in your body, right? And so there's that question, you put the question at the top of the paper, you close your eyes, you have a pen in both hands, and then you just let it go, as she has said. And it was incredible and almost instantaneous for me when we looked at it and we looked at the question, and it was so clear what was coming up for me. And then what you do next is you ask another question. So what is the next step for you now? So the first one could be like, what's the truth that's wanting to emerge in this situation? And then you do it again to say, well, what's the step that I need to take? And then, I mean, it's a very personal and subjective thing, of course, what you get from what you've done. But it was very interesting to see the correlation between what the left hand was drawing, which is linked to the right side of the brain, and what the right hand was doing linked to the left side of the brain. Yes, that has, I'm not saying pure left brain, right brain, but there are some elements of that one side was a far more creative response, and the other side was the side that I was like, yeah, this is what I would do. But then there was the integration. It really is very subjective, but I think if the stakes are high enough and you really clear your deck and you're stuck, you're really stuck on an issue and want to access some embodied knowledge, it works. And so I have now incorporated it when, I don't like to call myself a coach, I'm not. But when, supporting others to find their truth and to really be empowered and do stuff in the world, and it has been really transformational. I also use it with my now 10-year-old son. He's going to be 10 this month, and it has been really exceptional. So I really, if something about this tool is resonating with you, I really encourage you to give it a try, because I've seen it work over and over.
Thank you for that, Margaret. And I think one of the things about some of these tools is that if they become a practice, and what I mean by practice is something that you do regularly rather than just sporadically, you get much, much more from them. I suppose it's like, if you think about drawing, the more you actually practice your drawing, the more accomplished you become. And the same with this. It's not about being able to draw perfectly, but it's the information that comes through from just sitting and asking those questions, doing sometimes both hands, one hand, you taking your non-dominant hand and letting that tell you what it wants to tell you. All of those things can be really, really helpful. I too agree with Margaret in terms of they've given me a completely new perspective sometimes on something that is intractable, and I've found that really helpful.
And kind of links to something Ethan said earlier as well, that for him the masculine is that focused and directed thinking around something, but this is a tool to just help you quiet that and just explore in a different way. So
lovely.
So Alyssa, do you want to lead us in whatever? Guys, if you all want to take a 1-minute break, we don't want to take too long, and then Alyssa can come back. Alyssa can come and lead us in what I hope your experience with her is pretty special. You got a taste of it earlier during the tech, but it's really a special thing that we have. And it's designed for this particular masterclass about embodying the feminine. So let's see how it goes. Marion, I see you there. And so it'd be great, I think, as well, to have just a open sort of exploration at the end.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Perfect. Yeah.
Alrighty, if we are all back from our bio break, important, we can come together in the room, feel your body. You're bringing things in, and there's new information. Being the art of presence and understanding our essence. We're going to breathe to connect. We're going to breathe into brave spaces. Let the idea of the metacognitive drawing settle. Give everything some space. So breathing for being in our bodies, breathing for balance, breathing for creativity. We thought about or felt around our necks a little bit. Just as we inhale, bring your shoulders up a little bit. Just very gently. And exhale, let them go. Inhale, shoulders up very gently. Exhale, let them go. As you just feel that, I'm just going to show you some of the patterns that we're going to do. So when we move through them, it's easier. We'll go back to balanced breaths, which we did before. And we'll also do perfect breaths, which we met already this morning. We're also going to do something that is called breath of fire. The feminine is fierce sometimes. With breath of fire, you concentrate or focus on the exhale. Just look at me a little bit and we'll see how it's done. I don't know how good this mic is. but it'll sound like this. Now only do as fast or as intense as is comfortable for you. If you're not used to this, your diaphragm might say something to you like, that feels like a pain, and your diaphragm is saying, ah, you know. But yeah, they snort also. So don't look in anyone's direction when you're doing this. You know, but just really breathe out through your nose with some force. And sometimes it helps if you put a hand on your diaphragm, but just concentrate on breathing out. And the inhale will take care of itself. Don't put your back into it or your neck into it. Just exhale and let the breath come out. Alternate nostril breath. It looks like some surfer dude is doing some sign. I don't know. Yes, through the nose, throughout, Becky. Your thumb on one side, ring finger, or what the classical guitarists will call annula, on the other side. And breathe out through the open nostril. And then you cover, breathe out and then breathe in, and then you cover, and then breathe out and breathe in. Cover, out, in, and we switch like that. That's alternate nostril breathing. Oh man, all right. So I'm going to start my timer and we're just going to do a few minutes of this. I have the time. If it feels good, close your eyes. If not, you can leave your eyes open, but widen your focus. Look at something a little further out in the distance. If it's more comfortable for you to get into your body, you can turn your cameras off and just really go into your breath. Be with your breath. Take this time to really let the breath move through you, with you, and just feel how it feels to be taking conscious control of something that happens 35,000, 40,000 times a day, you know. Are we breathing or are we being breathed? If I had to remember to breathe, I'm sorry, I would suffocate because I can't remember where my keys are from moment to moment. All right. So let's start with balanced breaths. Sit up nice and tall and make your inhale and your exhale the same length. That might be breathing into 4 and out to 4, or into 5 and out to 5. Like it felt like lying on the earth before. Feel supported by your breath and in your breath. And you might want to match the rhythm of your breath to the rhythm of your heart rate, and be curious about what that feels like in your body. Like the waves on the shore, your breath comes in and goes out. It doesn't come in and stay, or go out and keep going. There's the ease and flow all the time. And with that balancing of the breath, let us begin to do the breath of fire. Exhale through the nose and gently, only as fast or as intensely as is comfortable for you to do. And that for you might sound like if you start to feel lightheaded, go back to the balanced breaths. Focus on the air leaving your body through the nose with the force that you can generate. And if it's comfortable for you, you might want to pick the pace up, and that might sound like and that really brings some energy to your body. And if you need to go into a meeting, instead of a cup of coffee, that might be the jolt that might be useful. But gently, gently. And again, if it feels too much or it feels too intense, go back to balanced breaths and feel the settling return. And after the breath of fire, let us experiment a little bit with the hitch breath. So now we take 2 inhales and an exhale. And that sounds like in, out. In, out. In, out. In, out. Keep going with that pattern. That tells our body that our body is safe. So if our mind is racing and we find we can't calm down, or the breath is tight in our chest, or something feels overwhelming or totally uncertain, we can do that hitch breath. You'll see toddlers doing it when they're calming down after crying. The breath is always available. And if that hitch breath is too intense, come back to even or balanced breaths. Stay curious, be gentle with yourself, and stay with the breath. And now, let's do the alternate nostril breath. We take our thumb, place it on our right nostril, breathe out through the left, in through the left, Cover the left, breathe out through the right, and in through the right. Cover the right, breathe out through the left, and in through the left. Keep going. Find a rhythm that works for you, and really sink into that alternate nostril breathing. Release the hands. If you're sitting, put your hands in your lap. Take a nice juicy breath in through your nose and sigh out through the mouth. And a couple more in through the nose. Release the breath. One more. And in your own timing, come back to the room. Open your eyes. Feel grounded in your seat. And let's go. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alyssa. That was lovely. It's really interesting how you notice when you're doing breath exercises where I find I can feel where I'm carrying tension. I become more aware of it. So that whole thing about my neck, I suddenly thought, ooh, that doesn't feel so great.
That was incredible. Thank you, Alyssa. Thank you. That was wonderful.
So Marion, we'll jump back into your part.
Yep, sure. So the last bit of what I have to share with you. So this is the bit that I talk about looking at things from the perspective. I just trying. I need to put my glasses back on. I was wondering, why can't I see properly? So I'd taken them off because of doing the breathing. So I'm just going to change this. So one of the things that I use as well in my work is something that's called Knowledge Builder. And it's, I was just looking at different paths to leadership, but I'm going to share something else with you. Right. So I was looking, this whole aspect of looking at policy from a, I've got too many windows open here, sorry about that. So looking at policy, and I find that mind mapping is something that I find very, very useful to look at this. But then this knowledge builder, you can do all sorts of things with it and put links in and explore things from a different perspectives. And so I started, so this was my looking at how I might work within the organization to explore this a bit further, and the coaching that I do at an organizational level. And then I started looking at this, And because this enables you to look at it from a three-dimensional perspective. And then I was thinking about, well, what is it that we need to be considering? We know that in the UK, we have terribly long hours, and the hours that we work are much worse than across the whole of Europe. And one of the things that's happened as a result of the pandemic, we're all working virtually. We have no time between meetings. Some of this can be helpful because we know that actually we've seen an increase in the ways we collaborate within our working. But how do we start to enable managers to lead by example and establish priorities in our work so that we don't end up with some of these consequences of long hours culture, adverse impacts on our family and communities? So that was one thing I wanted to share with you, because I really do find using these explorations extremely helpful. And as I say, you can go and look at the different PDFs and things that I've added. So that there's Institute of Employment Studies have done a brilliant study on this, and and that link becomes part of that document that I just showed you. So that's one thing that I thought that as we explore this whole aspect of how visual methods can be useful in exploring policy as well. So that was one thing. The other element that I wanted to share with you with regard to this was how you can change something like that mind map that I shared with you into something that's more useful at an organizational level as a poster. And so I've also able to share, let's see where I've got some photographs. I wanted to share a photograph with you. Because I did some drawings that you can then use if you've got somebody who does graphic design, which I find very amazing. And so I did having a few discussions with a graphic designer as to how I might change one of these mind maps into something that could be used throughout the organization and in another way. So I'm kind of on my journey still with this one. So yeah.
I thought that was for us.
So
sorry.
So this is, so one of the things that I did was a drawing, and that, yeah, so this was negotiating the new normal through caring, connected communities. And so what we've been doing is exploring how we can connect better with our communities. So using creativity is one of the elements that we've been looking at, how we might start to use our green spaces across the city of Birmingham in a way that enables people to get healthy. We've also had quite a lot of discussion around Black Lives Matter in Birmingham too. So we see being such a multicultural city with so many different languages spoken, we see diversity as being our strength. And what we are wanting to do is looking at how we transform the system so that we can proactively address some of the actions and behaviours that are so important, like making sure that we have a planet that everybody can continue to use in a sustainable fashion. So that was one element. And the other one that I was looking at was this whole thing around work-life balance, and so turning a drawing into something that we can. Quite a few of my colleagues have now got this up on their wall because they say how useful it is to them to consider how much they're working. So those were the elements that I particularly wanted to share with you. So the 13 aspects of embodied leadership, they all start with a C, and they comprise being caring for each other, being creative, connections, how we connect with each other, our knowledge. So I used compendium as a way of looking at knowledge, because there was a lot of discussion in the interviews that I undertook about different types of knowledge, and a compendium is bringing together your learning on different and your expertise around different topics. So that was how I translated it into being a quality of embodied leadership. And then we looked at things about, so each of the interviews had a different element, and compassion was one of the favorite areas that I really enjoyed interviewing Margaret about, because she's got a really fantastic grasp of compassion and how it is so important within our organizations. And so how we explore some of those, how we're curious in all that we do, all of these are the elements that we bring into becoming a fully embodied person. And in order to become an embodied leader, we use those qualities in our relationships, in the connections that we make, how we can start to ensure that our communities can become ones that are caring for each other, where we care for each other. So that's kind of what I had kind of envisaged sharing with you today. But now I'd like to open it up a bit to you and see what your thoughts are on all of that. I'll stop sharing now so that we can see each other better.
I very much like it, and I think we started practicing it with a few groups. So for example, just a few weeks ago, there was a team that kind of went into the co-living, co-working space, and they very much praised the same value system as you just mentioned it. It surprised me a lot because it instantly felt like a family. I didn't even know the people. I mean, I interacted with them over Slack, for example, or over different communication channels to tackle all the issues and, correspond just to progress with the work. But it instantly felt like a family because everybody hugged, everybody took a lot of time to communicate, everybody ate together. They actually shared a lot of personal stuff with each other, and they wanted to create this type of a new working environment where families, friendship, and work habitation would actually converge or be together. And while you were just naming all these values and all these types of things that we need to keep in our minds, it very much sounded as the things that we are trying to bring to the surface. So yeah, I would definitely want to see that happening more often. There was also a lady that had right now an issue with getting the custody for their kids. And in Spain, for example, the problem was that because she's not living in the same city, even though she's only like an hour and a half away, the court might actually decide against her because she's not living right next to her kids. And we wanted to make sure to, kind of create some sort of a supporting system for the team to really have it on the paper that the whole company, the whole project wants to be as family friendly as possible. So she can work from home. She can actually, it's incredible what we are able to achieve. And I think a lot of that thing comes with us accepting that who we work with are the mothers. And it's the women that we need to very much respect, or the needs that previously were just disregarded, that we need to also keep in mind. And by doing so, it's incredible how the community actually comes together, because I think men might actually be very much predators. But yeah, it very much resonated with me. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think that whole thing about communication is really key. One of the things that when I was sharing with my team about how the importance of communication, if you really want to communicate effectively, listening is so integral to that. And so that we listen to connect with those that we're talking to, rather than to interject or to respond. We're listening to learn about others in order to have a much more effective and useful conversation. So that was what I was also hearing from what you were saying, Anya.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm also very much mindful of the time. We have half more hour to go. So maybe we go into the questions and answers and just open the whole
Sure.
conversation to a discussion between all of us.
Yeah, fine.
So I need to pass a hot potato. Anybody else wants to
go and pass the hot potato?
Elisa relaxed us.
I'll take it.
We're just like,
Anya, okay. Sorry, hi, thanks, Marion, for that. You mentioned at the beginning that there were 13 characteristics.
Yes.
Would you like to share that with us? Or
yeah, I was now what I meant to share with you a diagram, which so I'll go through them all. So the first one is caring. The second is creative. The third is courageous. The fifth is compendium. Then clarity, curiosity, character, compassion, commitment, communicator, connected, and community. And then right at the center of all of that is being centered.
What's 12 and 13?
Sorry, so
After community.
after
I know
community,
the last one is centered.
community. I'll just go to the beginning.
Connected.
Yeah.
It was commitment, communicator, connected, community.
Community is the last, yeah. And at the center of it all is centered.
And that's why you would have led us in exercises, starting off with, presencing yourself and grounding yourself. And from that center, and is it that you're saying that from your research, these are the characteristics that you are seeing, feminine aspects of embodied leadership?
Yes, absolutely. So this, and it's, as Margaret, as you said, it's not to do with male, female. It's these characteristics. Where we need our leadership to go in the future is around making sure that we are caring for each other, that we support each other through the different trials and tribulations that we have, and that we can come together and work out new ways of overcoming old issues and problems. So those, I think, the ways in which we develop that new world order, that we look at the new normal, is through these different qualities.
But why are you saying they're feminine qualities then?
Well, are they the same? What, in terms of leadership, in the way that it was, in terms of autocratic and top down? Would you say that those characteristics are of that kind of leadership, or something new, something that's more open and encompassing?
I'd like to think that those 13 characteristics are more encompassing and inclusive of good leadership.
Yeah.
Period. Whether they're seen as male or female, but I think, and I'm talking about from the boardroom perspective, you know, as board member and sitting and managing and coaching boards, you know, you need to be caring. We need to be caring about our environment. We need to be caring about our employees. We need to be creative around the kinds of solutions that can be employed to address this. It takes courage to be a director, to ask questions and to really stand up. We need clarity on so I can go through each one of those. And what I'm finding is we need more of these characteristics in leadership, in the boardroom context, if we want to shape a different and emerging world. It needs to be nurtured. We need to cultivate a lot of these characteristics more clearly in how it can be engaged in boardrooms and in meeting rooms.
It almost sounded to me as if these 13 characteristics, all starting with C, are how we create collective intelligence. Be it for female or masculine or whatever it is. Because maybe just grasping the idea from females, first and foremost, does not yet really make it justified to call it feminine. To me, it was almost as if I actually had a wrong expectation from the get-go, from the start, because we started the conversation, what is the difference between masculine and feminine? And it took me to the path where I wanted to understand the differences, and then I wanted to understand how, for example, we can progress with the feminine and how we might be making that more visible, and how the feminine face is going to be helping the masculine, and how we then come together and create something. It's not necessarily that it's not the sex that defines it. It's really the collective spirit that we are trying to create here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so I suppose that's one of the things, is that we've had a very much more masculine way of leading that has been so much the dominant paradigm, and that we need something which is more collective, more towards our community. How do we enable people to come up, have the courage to stand up to their convictions, to show their commitment to something that's new, that's needed? It's around that, looking at things in a slightly different way.
Becky has a hand up.
Thanks, Margaret. Yeah, I think just looking at the list, I think possibly I've had this sort of notion, I think from my experience, from my work experience, about this kind of this notion that that I think is kind of masculine. Now, whether that's whether that is a masculine trait that embodies itself in men and women, whether it's something that has evolved through men dominating the workplace, but this notion that, it's certainly, I mean, Thatcher was the epitome of it in that sense. She was that very kind of masculine, tough, not resilience in terms of bending and being flexible, but tough, iron, hard. And I think the new kind of thinking, and what has been really wonderful about today is the way that we've done the embodiment stuff and the breath work and the lying on the ground and the just kind of connecting with stuff that is not just very, very heady. There's a place for that, and that's, you know, out of a work context, that's something I've been doing a lot on a personal journey, just kind of more sort of somatic embodiment, I suppose, of stuff, rather than kind of intellectualizing and obsessing and overthinking. But the things that stand out for me in that list, which I think have been absent in that kind of idea, in that kind of sort of I'll say corporate, but it's not just the profit sector, private sector, but that kind of idea of how do I describe it? A kind of like a sense of entitlement. I mean, I know there's research that's been done around the way men and women in sort of high level roles perceive their getting there and their role, you know, the imposter syndrome, thinking I'm going to be found out. Women tend to say, oh, this opportunity came along and I was really fortunate. Men quite often say, I made this opportunity happen, for example. That's a very blunt, kind of crude example, but I think from this list, what's really standing out to me is the caring, the clarity, and the compassion. And that is kind of quite a sort of seismic shift, I think, from my experience in some workplaces, and to being prepared to kind of practice that from a leadership perspective, I think. And it kind of feels to me like all the other things fall into place once you're prepared to embrace those things, you know, caring for one another. Joy said it, you know, we need to care about each other, our planet, our ecosystems, and there's some great work happening around that, but it gives me a lot of hope. And I suppose, just as a little kind of question to Marion, I'd like to ask what your experience is, Marion, of taking that into contexts that could be potentially quite hostile to that. I'm not going to say softer approach, because I don't think it is about softness. I don't think that's the right word. Like somebody mentioned earlier. I think it was it Elisa or you, Marion? I'm not sure that compassion can be fierce.
Yeah.
I mean, compassion is fierce. Love is fierce, right? So kind of, it's how has it been, I guess, you know, taking it in those sort of harder environments.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I've found is that I think the place that we currently are in is a huge opening for talking about having these discussions at all levels within organizations. That's one of the things that I've definitely, I think over the past 18 months, I don't think I've ever had the chance to talk about courage and commitment, vulnerability, to the same extent. And I suppose one of the things that I've learned is, I remember a long time ago, this was in Devon, before I was becoming a consultant in public health. And I said, I want to have the convictions. And I never knew what was going to ensue after that. It was a whole heap of things that happened. But I think it's opened me up to a journey where I can get up today and say, this is my commitment. I have a piece that I have on the wall here, which I'm going to read to you. because it's basically, it's to the divine being in me. I commit to living a life that is supportive to others. I bring connection and community to enable us to live in a dynamic way that is abundant and healthful to all.
Amen.
Marion
Well, as
just
we say,
That's-
Ashe.
What was that, Margaret? Sorry.
Ashe.
Ashe.
thank you for a few last comments. And definitely send out the link for the WhatsApp group. Let's continue bringing all these 13 characteristics into the group that we have created. I think we should be maintaining them, even though some of them be fierce. Definitely divine altogether. But yeah, I mean, thank you so much, Marion. Thank you, Elisa, as well, for bringing us together and bringing us back.
Thank you, Marion, for this masterclass, and Alyssa for your usual beautiful transition launch. On this issue of feminine leadership, I feel like it's something that, as I said at the beginning, was my curiosity, and coming out of, I think, almost a provocation, maybe, that I never, this is my personal approach, I never liked the idea of this feminine leadership, or, you know, and that is what is needed now. I've never identified as a feminist, which is different from feminine leadership. And that is my own personal story and my own issues, right? But I've been exploring it. And I think it's linked to the fact that I come from Trinidad and Tobago, where, you know, women didn't have to fight for the rights in the way in which in European countries and in the West, women had to fight. We are later created country, if you want to put it that way. 1950s, 60s, we got our independence, and out of that, some of the defining struggles that had happened before were part of our founding constitutional arrangements. And so the lack of rights on behalf of women and women in leadership, I didn't grow up not seeing it. I saw it. I felt like we were on an equal plane. It is only in my later years, I feel, that I have been recognizing the challenges that women have in leadership roles, and understanding it more, right? But the point I wanted to make was, I mean, up to just a few years ago, I was asked to speak at a conference on women in leadership. I went to that conference to speak on something else. And after I spoke, they asked me to come and sit on this panel on women in leadership. And they didn't know my views, right? Because there was part of me like, women in leadership, I don't understand, you know, this whole thing that we must have all these women in the boardroom. To me, and this is the point I made, which I think when I read Marion's book, and I've learned quite a bit from Marion, and I feel into Marion's stuff. It's what Joy said at the beginning. It's what Becky has spoken to. I think if we're going into the 21st century, we're going into trying to define a new type of leadership for the 21st century. I think the old concepts and labels of feminine and masculine, I think there's so much of our own subjective narratives that we place on those concepts. I wonder how helpful they are going forward. And is it that we need more women in the room, or is it that we need more leadership that has these characteristics that you've identified? Leadership across the board, that's like that. Because as Becky said, that's how I used to feel. Look at Margaret Thatcher, that's a woman leader. You know, look at that one in the US, what's her name? Albright. Look at the women who've had very, very powerful positions. Some of them, the fact that they're women really hasn't helped us, transform the systems that we are all looking to try to transform. So for me, I don't know that I see these as feminine characteristics. I see it as what's required now, more connected leadership, more curious leadership. So if I were to pick out of the list, and maybe everybody could pick out of the list as Becky did and as Joy did, I would pick curiosity. I would pick connected and centered as where I would, my foundation, my starting. If I were to pick three, each of us might have a different three, but because it's stuff that we want to work on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I'm actually considering doing, is how to formulate something that can help people to elicit which areas they need to work on. And that's one of the things I'm kind of looking at now going forward.
Yeah, so I just want to say thank you to Marion. Thank you for Becky and Alyssa and Joy and Anya and Ethan, who was here earlier, and Alyssa and Hema, who popped in for a couple of minutes, and I'm Savia, who was here for a little bit as well. Thank you all for coming and exploring this with us, where I think was a very practical, hands-on, this is how we presence, and these are the tools that we can use to presence. I really encourage, I think, Becky and Joy, I think you all are not in our WhatsApp group, are you?
No, but Anya's just
Right.
sent the link, so
So Joy,
I will
please
be there.
join, because the cool thing about this WhatsApp group is that once you're in, you get access to all of the resources that we've been developing over the last year and a half.
Fantastic.
We have over 100 hours of multimedia content for you to explore.
Yeah.
All there for you. Once you're a member of the WhatsApp group, you get access to these things.
Okay.
And
fantastic.
to masterclasses going forward every month.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've only been to one before, which was the eco side. When you had Jojo Meta, which was
right.
was great. But
let me give
thank you.
Yeah, let me give you this FLCV.
And this is one book that I've been reading recently, which is brilliant. It's fantastic. It's published last year, called Grounded by Ruth Allen. It's got loads of things about how nature can improve your mental, physical well-being. It's brilliant, absolutely superb book.
And we will be sending to you Marion's materials, that if you haven't had it yet, and via email, we'll send that to you via email, and a recording of this. If you would like it, you will have access to all of that. I've put a code into the chat, FLC 2021 VIP. If you go onto futurelaw.io, thank you, Anya, and you put in that code, you are getting complimentary membership into our community, because we are really just trying to build this community of people who are trying to work together from many different disciplines, but sharing that heart space, that recognition that there are new ways of being and doing that we have to embody, and to support each other across disciplines in what we're doing. So welcome to all of you, Becky and Joy. You're the last ones here who are very new. Welcome to our community. As you can see, we're very informal. We're very cool. And going forward, I hope to see you all in all of the other stuff, which now you have complimentary access to. So
Thank you very much. It's been wonderful.
It's been, I've really enjoyed. I'm loved to getting to know you a bit more, Joy, and Becky, you as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you, Margaret and Anya, for putting it on, if I've got it right in terms of roles, Marion, your content, Alyssa taking us to another place. It's just, it's just been a wonderful 3 hours in the company of I was going to say brilliant women. I guess I can now because we've lost the man.
Yeah. Hang on.
Wonderful people, brilliant women. Yeah, just lots of head and heart stuff, and body, head, heart, body, soul stuff. Bringing it together makes me feel in quite dark times very, very hopeful, to connect with people who are yeah, just great minds, big hearts, trying to do good
Right.
work. So
Yeah.
thank you very much. It's an honor to be part of your tribe, the gang.
Our tribe now. Our tribe now.
Yes.
Okay. Blessings. Okay, guys.
Thank you. Bye.